So, I wanted to come in and chat about grief because grief is something that has been really big. So, I feel really called to come in and share with you guys that the grief is what packs the punch the most. Like, don't get me wrong, it's gut wrenching, heart breaking, soul probably more soul destroying in some ways. And, I'd love to hear what you guys think about the grief that you've experienced in releasing yourself from the narcissistic relationship, the toxic space, etc., etc. If that's actually what you now sit back and go, actually, that is what's really hurting the most. So, and I firmly believe that grief is one of the things that packs the punch the most because it's easy to go, no contact. It's easy to go and put a boundary in place. It's easy to go, yep, no more. It's easy to walk away. It's easy to do all of these things. And you'll be listening to me going, it's fucking not easy, Cass. It's this, this, and this. But that's the trauma bond, right? And I get it. I've been there, I also have narcissistic family members as well. I have a continuous cycle of narcissism in my life on repeat all of the time. So I do know the trauma bonding. I do know getting the sucked back in. I do know the hoovering, but I also know that the no contact and the boundaries is one of the easiest things to continue to do once you're on top of it. It's the grief, though, that packs an absolute punch, right? And it's the grief. I've grieved the narcissistic relationship, that the grief, again, is washing over. And it's not the deep, profound grief that I used to have. But let me tell you, it still kicks. It still hurts. It's still just why do you have to be like this? Why can't you just be a normal parent? Why can't I have one of those? I'm human. It still happens to me too. And this is the crux of being caught in this narcissistic cycle, that people, unless you've been through it, don't actually fully comprehend or understand that these feelings, the way that our body has been conditioned, and especially when it comes to a parent, you've been conditioned since utero for every day, minute, second of your life. It's come down to that conditioning. And yes, we can sit here and say, oh, it's a limiting belief and it's a core trauma and childhood trauma and it's this, and this, which is all absolutely true. And you can absolutely take all the steps, do all my programs, do all of the things to help you process, to help you heal, grow, and thrive. There is absolutely no doubt about that. There's tons of bloody testimonials in this group, and half of you that have done those programs that know and are testament to that. However, there will always be elements of when you come back into contact with that person where you don't go, oh, I wish it was different. I wish it had have been this, and we feel that loss, right? So it's the grief that continues to pack a punch all the way through, all the way through the healing, all the way through the process, all the way. So even then, when you have healed and you are growing and thriving, that there will still be those elements of, those compassion moments as well, where it's like, it's just sorry that you're like that. It's just a sad, sorry story that you're actually really like that. And, then you actually come to a space, and I'd love to hear what everyone thinks about this, where you actually grieve for them too, that they are so missing out on so much of life, so much of their own life force, so much of your life force and what you've created. They're missing out on all of it, right? So there's another layer and wave of grief there too. Then there's when you're at, like I was at basketball with my son last night, and he's just shooting goals and doing so well, and I was scoring, and I had someone on FaceTime because I want to watch his games every week as well. People that are invested in our lives, and there are moments of, it's just so sad that those people are missing out on this. And when those people are actually there out of whatever story they want to run, they're not getting it at that beautiful, deep, compassionate embodiment level of, this is my family and how proud I am to have them and to have raised them how they are. Instead, it's I need to be seen here for whatever story they're running so that I can check my list that I've done the family obligation of going and seeing, and then I've got this story to go back and tell all of my friends back home who keep asking me about these things. It's just a whole level of wrong. Drop some emojis if this totally resonates with you as you're listening to this. So I'm curious, where are you at with your grief? Because grief is the trickiest part to navigate, and it is hard, I'm not going to lie. You know, one of the biggest things when we're going through our training of counseling, hypnotherapist, even coaching, you know, it's a big taboo word. Don't say hard. Wireless disconnection. Hopefully I'm back. I think I'm back. I just lost connection. They're doing an ambient upgrade here somewhere. Circling back around grief, because it doesn't matter what level of grief you're going through or when you're going through it. Grief is always going to be a loss. It's just like physically losing someone physically passing. It's exactly the same level of grief. And we don't realize this or even comprehend that we're grieving this relationship, that we're grieving that this person, even though they're physically there in our presence, be it a parent, be it a family member, be it the workplace, be it the co-parent, they physically are in front of us. So we don't actually look at that like a loss or that we need to grieve it, because that person is still physically present in human form. And the thing that we need to grieve is that that relationship isn't going to be what we wanted it to be. That relationship isn't all of the dreams and beautiful emotions and feelings that were created within us and stamped within us at that time that they were discussed early on in those relationships, that they're not actually going to come true. It's that grief. It's the matching up of the reality to the subconscious vision of what it was going to be, of what it was promised to be, of who they promised to be. It's that grief of marrying those two things together. And then underneath that grief, we have that whole, oh, well, obviously I'm not good enough to achieve that if it didn't come true. I'm not worthy. I'm not deserving. All of those things then crop up underneath that. And that's why grief packs a whole punch. And then if it's a parent, it's the parent when they do finally come around and message or ring or visit or attend an event or a kids event or a Christmas event or a social occasion or a family barbecue, that you just sit back and go, why? Why? And that's another layer under the grief again too. You can put it wherever you want, but it just keeps coming, and that's why it packs such a punch. So the grief work takes a lot of time and processing. And when it comes to grief, grief is literally the adaptation, you adapting to the loss, you negotiating and navigating around this loss. And I do firmly believe that when it comes to the narcissistic relationships, romantic partner or a parent in particular, that that the grief process takes longer, is actually harder to go through. Because when we lose somebody, they're physically gone. Spiritually, we can still obviously talk to them and we have these beautiful connections with them. But physically, we know that when we go there, we don't get nurtured. We don't get that emotional connection. We don't get that happening. When we have the narcissistic parent or the narcissistic romantic partner, co-parent, when we go there, we are nothing. All that we are then seeking that's imprinted is this promise that was stamped in our subconscious and in our body many moons ago of what it was gonna be. And then when it comes to a parent, parents are supposed to be nurturing and kind and caring and compassionate and trustworthy and loyal and supportive. and they continue to never be any of those things. And that is why it is so difficult to maintain relationships with a narcissistic parent in particular, because they're never going to be that. And it's when we're grieving that and negotiating around that, navigating around that loss, we're literally like, the tree that breaks and then still grows. It's adapted around its trauma. That's what we're doing. We're adapting around the trauma. We're adapting around the loss. It's still there. And this is why grief can pack such a punch, because it can be long standing. I mean, don't get me wrong, as we move through it, the way that we feel about it and the way that we look at it does change, just like in any grieving space. However, when we're grieving a lost loved one, we reflect on beautiful memories of them, and we think back and we just really love in that space and soak up in that space. When we're doing handover or have graduation and the co-parents there, or there's a wedding or an engagement party or a 21st or a special birthday party, or even just a school event, or when it comes to the Christmas parties and the catch-ups and the buying the Christmas presents and family barbecues and things like that with the narcissistic parent, we're not looking back at those people with love and adoration and connection and missing that. We're looking at them with contempt, bitterness, resentment, anger, and then perhaps longing for what we thought it was going to be but never was. And they're the things that we need to process through with this grief process to be able to heal, to be able to grow from it, to be able to still thrive from that. And that's why I firmly believe that grief still packs a massive punch in these circumstances. Because, I read another post today. It was funny, I follow someone else on Instagram, and they're like, narcissistic personality disorder, someone who's come into contact with a person like that or been in a relationship with someone who is narcissistic, it's the only mental health illness. It's the only particular behavior trait of a person where the actual person who is being susceptible or wrapped in the web of that person actually needs to go and have therapy instead of the person with the actual disorder. It's the only disorder that there is out there that's actually a reversed construction. Crazy, isn't it? So I'd love to hear where everybody's at with their grief. Would love to hear how you've been processing it and how you're coping with it.